and ventilations too late in the day. People sometimes call the government insensitive for not considering popular opinions without realizing that government has indeed considered those opinions and have provided actually the equivalent of medicine after death if the express after the issues at stake have been treated, passed, and gazetted. This is a lesson for all members of the media and civil society, journalists and media commentators. We have also contributed to macroeconomic stability of the nation. The Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, as well as its monitoring and enforcement by the Commission itself, have caused macroeconomic policies as well as assumptions underpinning respective proposed medium-term expenditure frameworks and annual budget proposals derived from them to be placed in the public space for purposes of exchange of ideas with citizens and other interested specialists. The proposals are meant to be available to be supported, interrogated, challenged, and corrected if need be. We've energized the public finance ecosystem. The Commission and its Enabling Act equally contributed to the energized public finance ecosystem, which gave rise to the payment reforms such as BIPLIS, IPs, BVN, the federal government transparency, fiscal transparency policy open treasury portal, and other fiscal reforms. We've also contributed in the mobilization of domestic revenue of the federal government. The generation of independent revenue through the payment of operating surplus is one aspect of the mandate of the Commission that has indeed added great value to governance. Government-owned enterprises, GOEs, and corporations are by the Act committed to remit 80% of the operating surplus to the consolidated revenue fund of the federal government. The payment of operating surplus into the CRF is born out of the need for government to generate funds on returns on its investments. More so because the corporations neither pay income taxes nor dividends. Through the persistent and continuous engagement of MDAs by the Fiscal Responsibility Commission, and especially with the support of the National Assembly and the Executive, the federal government share of operating surplus from these corporations has indeed continued to increase over the years. From our records, the total figure paid as operating surplus since the establishment of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission and the operation from date is beyond 2.15 trillion. And we are still counting even as we are seated here, which, by the way, could not have been possible without the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the Commission's operation, given that there would have been no law, rule, regulation, or institution requiring such returns. Sadly, many NDAs still persist in defaulting and practically keeping money away from federal government's reach for funding its budget. Our records indicate that over 1.2 trillion is still in the hands of defaulting agents. These figures are confirmed from our analysis of the annual audited financial reports submitted to our commission by the concerned agencies. And we have been talking about this for the past 2 to 3, 4 years, and we've been insisting that these agencies must remit. And we want to thank the National Assembly, particularly the Finance Committee of both chambers, particularly of the Senate, for the very supporting role they've been playing for the past 3 to 4 months in pushing up these agencies in remitting funds, because a lot of them are still in default as we speak. Much more is yet out there in the hands of MDAs that either have failed to dutifully audit their accounts or that have done so but chose not to forward copies of their audited financial reports to the Commission as required by law. Provisions of technical assistance to subnationals Much of fiscal federalism exempts much of the expenditures and finances of states and local government from control by the federal government. The Fiscal Responsibility Act requires the Commission to encourage and support subnational governments with technical assistance towards enacting fiscal responsibility laws and bylaws that are similar to Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007. To this effect, the Commission has been engaging state governments to take seriously the issue of institutionalization of mechanisms for fiscal responsibility management and measurement. Thanks to the Commission's encouragement, over 20 states have so far passed the law and established fiscal responsibility laws and agencies, while many others have adopted alternative or at different stages of completing their own adoption of fiscal responsibility laws. This figure is not cheery though, considering the importance of institutionalized fiscal responsibility measures and the quantum of effort that the Commission has expended in this regard. Nigeria has only one macroeconomy of which states and local government constitute subnational components. Indeed, the extant revenue allocation formula avails over 50% of the Federation's annual revenue to states and local governments combined. Any failure of these tiers of government to be fiscally responsible erodes the aggregate fiscal position of the Federation. While the Commission restates its commitment to continue to render assistance as required by the Act to such states that have shown interest, we want to, and we're indeed using this opportunity to call on all the state houses of assembly, and particularly the executive governors of these states who have not told this line, to take immediate measures towards concluding the enactment and establishment of these critical laws and institutions respectively for the benefit of their citizens, because we only have one economy. Verification of debt, indebtedness, and borrowing by subnational government. An essential part of the powers of the Commission is the monitoring of federal, states, and local governments, with the aim of ensuring the sustainability of debts of federal and subnational governments. We will continue to work with relevant government agencies to achieve consistency in sustainability of the national debt and adherence to rules and conditions for borrowing. Sections 41 and 44 of Fiscal Responsibility Act specifically provide the rules and conditions for borrowing by any government in the country. Some of the rules you may wish to know are: the government at all levels must only borrow for capital expenditure and human development. That any government in the Federation desirous of borrowing must prepare a clear cost-benefit analysis showing the economic and social benefits of the purpose to which the intended is to be applied to for the greater benefits of the citizens. That the intended borrowing must be authorized, approved by a proper legislative body, in the case of the federal government, by the National Assembly, and for the states, by the State House of Assembly, and in the case of local government, by the local government legislative councils. That the intended loan must be captured in Appropriation Act, either by the National Assembly or by the State House of Assembly as presented by the Executive for that particular year. That the borrowing must be concessional terms with low interest rates and with a reasonably long amortization period. The Commission does embark on verification of amounts borrowed as well as actual utilization. The Commission particularly seeks to find out if the process of borrowing comply with the rules and whether the funds are utilized for the purpose for which they are borrowed. We also engage in promotion of citizens' enforcement of the Act. The Commission has been strategically raising awareness on the essence of fiscal responsibility practice across tiers of government. And of course, you know that this is one of those awareness forums. We have encouraged citizens to partner with the Nigerian state in the enforcement of Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007 by taking advantage of Section 51 of Fiscal Responsibility Act, which states that a person shall have the legal capacity to enforce the provisions of this act by obtaining prerogative orders or the other remedies at the Federal High Court without having to show any special or particular interest. In addition, the Commission has trained and sensitized many civil society organizations to interface with federal and subnational government on issues of transparency, accountability, and tracking of execution of federal government projects. We are also having a strategic engagement with the Nigerian higher education community for purposes of improving teaching and advocacy of rule-based fiscal responsibility management from the educational sectors. We also engage in verification of federal government capital projects with a view to physically verifying the existence of projects listed in the budget and particularly ensuring that federal government has gotten value for money spent and that the Commission, in line with Fiscal Responsibility Act, has since inception conducted fiscal verification of over 1,001 capital projects spread across the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria. The 2 key observations over the year are as follows. Over 60% of government agencies do not associate their annual budgets with a medium-term expenditure framework. This is responsible for some agencies simultaneously undertaking more projects than they can handle at a time. The benchmark of approving new contracts by new government at different levels to the detriment of existing contracts as well as inadequate funding have led to a lot of abandoned projects, which of late the president, the federal government have done a lot to improve on completion of the previously already awarded projects, but it's not yet uhuru in that regard. Development of Fiscal Responsibility Index. The Commission have in partnership with a civil society group, and we're still working with them, Center for Social Justice. We've developed and introduced a Fiscal Responsibility Index for monitoring and assessing the level of fiscal discipline and prudence across federal MDAs. This has proved helpful in ultimately predicting the attitudes of giving MDAs to policies of federal government. It will thus be useful to determine appropriate interventions. We are also taking steps to ensure that we do not just stop at the initial efforts we've made. We are looking at a situation whereby we can spread our net, cover all the MDAs within the federal government. But for now, what we've already covered are just a percentage of it. We are looking forward to doing that in the nearest future. We've also given institutional support to National Assembly. Just like the well-known adage has said, if the right hand washes the left hand will equally wash the right hand. We as a commission, we have continued to reinforce the mandate of the commission. The efforts of the commission has become a major resource point to the National Assembly, particularly its committees on finance and public accounts committee. We've also been very useful to other committees of this National Assembly by providing them with the much needed data and resource to enable them to conduct their oversight functions. Presently, the Commission participates regularly at the ongoing Senate Committee on Finance investigating public hearing on remittance of revenue to the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the government. In March, the same token, the Commission is also playing an important role at the ongoing public hearing on compliance by the House of Representatives Committee on Public Hearing. Every year, the Commission avails the National Assembly of its audit annual report, availing the parliamentarian data with me to conduct oversight functions on revenue-yielding corporations, particularly regarding the remittance of operating surplus, which some of them try to use. Some of them try to use creative accounting to evade. This collaboration with National Assembly has yielded good fortunes. Needs of the Commission. Setting overall limits for amounts of consolidated debt of the federal, state, and local government. Section 42(1) of Fiscal Responsibility Act recites the setting up of debt limits for federal and state and local government. We want to urge the National Assembly to see how we can come about this so that our nation will be better for it. Our funding has been a lot of challenges. Though these are lean days for the government in terms of finances, it needs to be stressed that the major challenge currently facing the Commission is inadequate funding. The consequences for delivering on the Commission's mandate are not that easy. We need to also close the gaps in the present FRA. At this stage, I want to appeal especially to you all to take note of the obvious lacuna as contained in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. There are obvious challenges which have hampered the operation. If you go through the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the Principal Act, you will notice that several offenses were provided. About 46 offenses were provided, but no sanction or punishment. Where do we go from here? We want to use this opportunity, as we've always done, to call upon the Parliament, the National Assembly, to take steps to strengthen the Act. By so doing, also strengthening the Commission. I want to use this opportunity to reiterate my gratitude to CSO and all of you gentlemen of the press and other persons that have contributed to the successful organization of today's event for the privilege given to me to speak on fiscal responsibility, transparency, and accountability in our beloved country, Nigeria. In closing, I leave you with a call for your partnership in pursuit of the goal of considerably transparent and accountable government financial management framework in which revenue-raising policies, resource allocation, and debt management decisions are undertaken in a prudent, transparent, and timely fashion. In other words, we invite you, both as a group, as individuals, as citizens of our beloved country, Nigeria, for us to partner with the Fiscal Responsibility Commission in preventing corruption. The reality is that the Commission exists to prevent corruption from happening in the first place. Unlike other agencies that are established to fight it, to prevent it so that it doesn't occur, because the cost of fighting corruption is very enormous. The Commission has been taking solid measures to that effect since its inception, and results have been recorded. There is no doubt that FRC remains the answer in stopping corrupt practices in public finance management. We will continue to do our best, not minding the obvious challenges and the lapses, to ensure that there is value for money in our public financial management system. Thank you once again for your kind audience. Let me once again, on behalf of the management and staff of Fiscal Responsibility Commission, express our gratitude to CSO and indeed all of you that found it worthy to be here today. Together, we'll continue to raise the bar of fiscal management and accountability and transparency in our country. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. So I will give room for 2 questions. so that we go for Tony.
My name is Tony Akonwe. I work in the National Business. Number one, I have a few questions. One, the operating surplus. What actually constitutes this operating surplus? That's number one. Secondly, we talked about MDAs that are defaulting. Can you give us the exact numbers of these MDAs that are defaulting in remitting this operating surplus? And then lastly, sometimes last year, at one of the investigative hearings, there was a disagreement between the House Committee on Finance and one of the agencies on whether to remit 25% of IGR or 80% of operating surplus. Because there was a circular, there was a circular from the Office of the Accountant General that says they should remit 25% of their IGR or 80% of operating surplus, whichever is higher. So we want to know the difference between these two. What are they actually supposed to remit? Thank you.
My name is Todwe. I write for Bangladesh.
Let's speak on the questions.
Yes. Earlier in your address, you talked about that you have one of your responsibilities is to recommend for sanctions of defaulting agents. I want to know how many of these agencies you've recommended for sanctions, and specifically the agencies recommended for sanctions. Thank you, sir.
I'll go straight to answer your questions, but after my input, I will invite, because some of them have a lot of legal implications like the issues, I will invite information to also make an input. First and foremost, it's important you understand the provisions of the law. The provisions of the law is very clear that you remit 80% of operating surplus. And while you are retaining 20% to establish special reserve fund for the agency. However, because of the obvious challenges we encountered in the process of implementation, and when the federal government that owned these government enterprises noticed some of the tricks of these revenue agencies in one, delaying the submission of their annual audited account. Because as I speak with you, a lot of these agencies are still in arrears of the audited account. Some are even in arrears of, even in some cases, those that have submitted will even write you after calculating the operating surplus. Based on it, they will now write you for withdrawal, realizing that you worked out what they should pay. There will be mumble and jumbling and trying to make efforts to withdraw their earlier and supplant it. So we encountered a lot, and the federal government felt it, because 80% will be remitted originally after calculation, which you will do from the annual audited account. So the Honorable Minister of Finance, in her wisdom and in consultation with the federal government, came up with a circular, the 25% which you are talking about. That 25% is meant to enable them to be able to remit in advance 25% of their gross revenue in advance. This will enable government in the interim to be able to get some funds, to get working. Don't forget that the 80% operating surplus will be determined based on when you have prepared and submitted your audited accounts. So, in order to beat these agencies and provide funds for the government in the interim, you are now expected to remit 25% of your gross revenue. This also is in the interim. At the end of the financial year, when you must have submitted your audited account, your actual operating surplus will now be determined. If you are under-remitted, you will now, Fiscal Responsibility Commission will now write you. You must have had several cases of our requesting that this agency is owing this, just like we are still making the case. That is what normally leads to it. But you must be aware that the federal government is also reviewing both the circular and even the law is in the process of being amended. The practical reality of today is that government may not be able to afford that 25% gross revenue. Much more may be required from these government-owned enterprises. Also talking about the question of
the agencies we are recommended for such.
I will invite my head of legal, Barrister Charles Savannah, to speak on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, gentlemen. The question was on how many agencies are recommended for sanctions, and around the provisions of the Act. Now, I need to remind us again that while making this address, the chairman did observe, and that's very apt in this particular matter, that the Act as it is today, that the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, does not contain specific punishments for infractions. That is the major weakness in that Act, and that has hampered especially enforcement. It is true that the Act gave the Commission power to investigate and then send the investigation reports to the Attorney General of the Federation for possible prosecution. Now ask me, what is the possibility of prosecuting somebody for an infraction in which the law has not provided for a punishment? So, what we have done in the Commission, from our experience, most of the infractions that we have seen has been in the area of failure to submit financial statements that we talk about. If you look at the Act itself, Section 2, gives power to the Commission to compel any person, government or public institution to provide information regarding its revenues and expenditure. Now, it's on the basis of those information that we're able to get that we can determine whether there has been an infraction with regard to revenue and expenditure. So, our experience has been sometimes we read some agencies give us information on this and this matter. Give us your audited financial statement, and they say to do that. Now, the Act has not given a specific, before now, a specific punishment that will attend such refusal to disclose information. You understand? So what we have done to work around it is to partner with other secret agencies, especially the Office of the Attorney General, even the Ministry of Finance. So now, I only have to now look at those particular agencies. Now we have the TSA. The government has the TSA policy, that is single account. So what we now do is, if we believe you are not limited or paid over is supposed to pay the federal government, which is already an infraction as it were, we advise the Office of the Attorney General, and of course, see what we think that this agency is supposed to pay the federal government. It will now be a duty to deduct from the TSA account, from source, and credit the CRF as it were. So, but as we have to speak now, part of the amendment process that the National Assembly is to provide for punishment, proper sanctions, imprisonment, and even fines for those who deliberately refuse to obey this law. And if that comes up, and also if the National Assembly, because of in amenities and give the commission the power to prosecute directly, then you now start hearing of people being tried to court for not obeying the act. So that is where we stand with regard to the